Okay, so I'm just going to share this dream with you then. So this one I'm going to title Dark Star. Again, that'll be explained. It's to do with the last dream. But this one took place on the 7th of January 2025. Recording this now in August 2025, so roughly sort of 7 months ago. This one is all about war, basically. More or less all about war. So it's split into quite a few different sections. So the first section, how it starts is I'm basically talking modern day. I'm talking with friends. We're all talking about our grandparents and what they did in the war and stuff like that. And yeah, I'm talking about what my grandparents did, specifically on my mum's side. I'm talking about, and they're talking about theirs. I seem to remember that there was like black and white pictures or something like that, and in looking at the picture, I was kind of looking at the picture, and then I just kind of went into this black and white picture, and then I was kind of living out, I feel, the kind of military life, I guess, of my granddad, which is quite unique the way it kind of went into the photo like that. I don't know if it was black and white. I don't think it was black and white that I was seeing it, but it was, yeah. But yeah, anyway. So it went into that, and what the dream was about in this section was going through military training for the Second World War. So I was on my belly, going through mud and stuff like that. Where you've got barbed wire and stuff around you, and you've got other troops that are firing over your head, live fire kind of stuff, and you're swinging on ropes and you're climbing over walls and all of that kind of stuff. Is basically what I was doing, all basic training stuff. I remember that I nearly drowned actually in that scenario where I was going through some sort of boggy, muddy sort of area and nearly kind of sunk to the bottom or something like that. But that's how that pretty much finished in that one. The second dream then, this was then again to do with war, but it was very, very different. So in this, again, modern day, I was sitting in my bedroom, I guess, something like that, but I was playing on a PC. Playing computer games. I haven't played computer games on a PC for a long time, but I did used to a lot. And the game that I was playing was very much like the one I used to play on my PC, which was called Command and Conquer. So that's a kind of good versus evil, I guess you would kind of call it, where you get to choose to be the good guys or the bad guys, and then you basically build up a base, and then they'll build up a base somewhere, and then you'll go and attack them. You'll build up your infantry units, you'll build up your tanks, maybe if you've got water on your map, then you've got boats and all sorts of stuff like that. You start off with a little base, and then you build up your power stations, your barracks, your vehicle manufacturing places, all that kind of stuff. So that's what was happening. I was just having a brief go on that, but I was kind of guided by somebody else. So so there was actually someone from reality who's a YouTuber and also an author, done stacks and stacks of books. He does a lot of actual ancient scroll interpretation. What's it called? In what am I trying to say? Interpreting it, from original languages, putting it into English, putting it into books, that kind of stuff. But called Ken Johnson. So I don't know how well known he is actually, but I've got quite a lot of his books. They're all mainly extra biblical ones. So they're some of the books that are mentioned in the Bible that are ones that they kind of cite a bit like First Enoch, and there's some other ones as well, like Book of Gad the Seer and stuff like that. Anyway, he was there. He was basically just tutoring me on, oh, you want to do this now? Oh, you want to do that now? Now build up these troops, do this, do that. So he was kind of like helping for my tactics, I guess, in winning this computer game, this war computer game. One of the things that was very futuristic about it was that there was an infantry unit which had a plasma rifle, which was never in the game. It wasn't exactly that game, but it was very, very similar. And it was a rifle where you shot it and it fired out kind of like this, almost like ball lightning, but it was like a plasma ball that was blue that came out that hit people. Yeah, that was these infantry units. Anyway, next dream. So next dream is then third part. So In this one, I'm in a really cold place. I'm walking around kind of countryside sort of area, and with a childhood friend called Dan, who I've known probably since I was about 8, 9, 10, something like that. Now 43. 43, and so I've known you for a long time. We've got out of contact. I mean, that kind of contact dropped really ever since, having kids and stuff like that. My kids are 15 years old, and so on. So it's been a long time, but occasional contact. But he seems to feature probably more than anybody else. So he's the oldest friend I've probably got, and as I said, very loose kind of contact. Haven't been in contact the last 2 years, as an example. So I was with him, and I was pointing off into the distance. So I was saying, look at that mountain. And this mountain was absolutely massive. It was the mountain where almost you can look from almost like to your side, to your other side, and you're tens of miles away. And this mountain just dominates the skyline. It's absolutely massive. And I said to him, again, I'm not sure if it's a bragging way, but I said, I climbed that mountain over there. And he kind of looked at me and was like, oh, I'd really like to do that as well. And he was really keen to do it. So we started trudging through all the snow. And there was snowy here, so obviously it was quite a snowy mountain, but I'm not sure it had snow all the way up or whatever it was. I don't know if it was like an Everest kind of sort of thing or not really. But yeah, as I said, we set off, and that's really all there was to that one, other than to say, as I said, his name is Daniel. And when I looked up, because I remembered in my mind that there's some scriptures where it talks about the mountain that kind of dominates the whole world, and I actually thought it was in Revelation, but I think there's parts to do with Revelation where it talks about a change in what is high then is brought low, and all of that kind of things, and how things change. I'm not sure if that's to do with like the new earth kind of scenario, or whether it's part of the sort of tribulation time. I can't really remember, but anyway, I did a quick sort of Google just to send me in the right direction, and it was actually Daniel 2, which was the one that was kind of made me think about it, where it talks about the mountain, the eternal kingdom filling the earth, which is not that it would fill the earth, but it was, as I said, absolutely huge. Also is Isaiah 2:2 talks about Mount Zion being the highest peak. So I don't know whether that was meant to represent Mount Zion, possibly. And then obviously you've got in Daniel, haven't you, where it talks about the stone that's, hewn out of not of human hands, that strikes the base of Daniel's statue. Don't know whether it was anything to do with that, but that was really all there was to that part. So next bit is fourth part. I think this is the main part. Yeah, this is the main part. So the fourth dream. And I'm not sure on the order of all of these. I've just put these into the most logical order from where I kind of remember them, but they may be slightly out of order. But this one absolutely was a last dream. And what you'll tend to find, and I have said many times, is the last dream is always the dream it feels like God wants you to remember. And this one will be more elaborate. This will quite often have a mic drop kind of moment where you're just like, whoa, what was that? I get that. I've had that quite a few times. This was sort of like that. It was sort of like that. So main part of this one is, where are we? Yeah. So I'm kind of, so I'm looking up at the sky. I was actually in a car, but I'm looking up the sky. I'm assuming I'm going along in the car, but I'm looking up, and I notice what almost looked like a grid in the sky, which sounds really strange, but it was kind of like lots of dots I could see. Just with my eyes, nothing special, but I could just see these dots in lines, so it all just looked a little bit odd to me. Now I remember once actually where I saw that looking up at the stars, and I said, it looks like a grid. All these stars look like they're all connected. They're all two in line. What's going on? It was kind of like that. I was kind of looking at it thinking, this is weird. This sky looks like a grid. Then I noticed that there was, I saw a military plane kind of going over very, very slowly. Almost, it got to the point where it looked like it was now hovering. And what I could then see is my eyesight then kind of went binocular vision. You know, I didn't have binoculars, but my eyesight did. So the dream zoomed in on this plane, and I could see the, you know, the little, what was it, like the round circle star in the center and the stripes. I was like, oh, it's a US plane. It was absolutely a US plane. I did also write, it had the flag on it, but I mean, obviously they never have a US flag, but that's what I meant by it, the Air Force logo for the United States. So the plane itself was very triangular. Now, the reason I decided to do this dream after the previous dream was I had a UFO dream, and they were triangular UFOs going across. Again, this is, I'm not sure when this was actually in comparison to the other one, but I thought, oh yeah, I'll go for this one because it's talking about triangular aircraft this time. So I zoomed in my vision, as I said, saw this logo. There's another plane of a similar specification. Now, what I would say is it's almost like, I quite like watching a lot of stuff about planes. It's actually as a result of this, to be honest. I started to get a few dreams that had planes in, and it kind of just piqued my interest a little bit, and I started to watch quite a few things around planes because I'm trying to identify what I've seen, because it felt like a plane that was not beyond human grasp, like it's maybe, you know, one generation on, or maybe 2 generations on from where we are at the moment. Future, not present, but not distant future. Anyway, so this plane, yeah, triangular in shape, and then as this plane kind of slows down in this area, I notice it's either that the dots move out, so rather than all being straight, they kind of move slightly. But I think it wasn't that actually. I think it was almost like they lit up or something, and it was like all of these dots in the sky, and it was daytime. All these dots in the sky. All these lights I was just thinking, was it daytime? Yes, it was daytime. All these lights in the sky were coming online. It was like they were like powering up, you know, kind of thing. And it was, I could see like a light coming on. And it's like they were repositioning or something. But loads of these all came online at the same time. So I then thought in the dream, oh right, this is Elon Musk's SpaceX thing that's coming online, and you know, there must be some sort of military operation, and they're using the satellites or something. I mean, as far as I know, they don't use it for aircraft at all. It's more for ground troops, isn't it? And providing internet and stuff for areas maybe of desert and stuff like that don't have coverage. Anyway, so they're coming online. These dots are obviously satellites. That's now obvious. And this US plane actually shoots down another plane. So it's almost like you have this US plane, just one plane, by the way, just one plane coming in, and then another plane kind of comes up to it, almost like to say, face to face, look, what are you doing here? You're in our airspace. This isn't yours. This one's hovering. This one's hovering. And then what happens is the US plane strikes first and actually shoots this plane down, but it shoots it down in a way I've never seen any current technology happen. Now, it was almost like you blink, you don't see it. So it shot what almost was like not a rocket, because it didn't have any jet trail. It was very short distance that it was firing, because as I said, these were like not head to head, but they're really, really close. But they were, you know, not a mile away, nowhere near that, you know, much closer than that, just facing off against each other. And it shot this. It was like a bolt coming out, and I wrote down it was like a laser but with no colour. So you could see that it'd been shot because it was like a streak that I could see, but it was so incredibly fast that there was no, as I said, there was no jet trail. It wasn't a laser. It wasn't a beam. It was a single shot that was so incredibly quick. It just ripped through this plane, and it fired this bolt, and then it paused for a second and then fired a second bolt, like a Hitman double tap sort of thing, you know. And this, I didn't see the plane go down, but then I saw this plane then go off, and it was like, okay, the element of surprise is gone, obviously. So let's get on with the mission. I'll explain a bit more about what I think it could be in a bit, and I'll describe a bit more about the plane itself and stuff like that in a moment. But just to carry on with what happened. So then this plane flies off, and then it's going in. It's then dropping a bomb. Now this, I say a bomb, it's a bit more like a missile actually, but it was absolutely massive in comparison to the size of the plane. So what I would very much liken it to is, you know, when you see the B-2 bomber, and obviously when they attacked Iran recently, you saw that big bomb they dropped, which I wrote it down somewhere. Is it called a MOP? Massive Ordnance Penetrator, a GBU-57. Yeah. It looked like that in scale. So, you know, when you see the B-2, you see the body of the B-2 and it almost fills the entire body, and you think, how do you fit that in the plane? It was kind of like that. It was humongous, absolutely huge in comparison to the size of the plane. This bomb that dropped, and it's like it just had one bomb, you know, on board. I wrote down that it almost looked like a Saturn V rocket, you know, the 1960s rocket that was used to go to the moon, wasn't it? That one, I think. Obviously not saying the same scale, but it was like the shape was similar. So it was kind of quite thick, went to a point, and then it kind of had a little something on the point to it. And again, in investigating bombs and stuff like that, I did look up one, and it looked very much like some of those type of bombs that they do use. I almost thought it was like a laser guided bomb almost. But it was huge, and what happened was it dropped and it just went into free fall. So this plane has obviously gone up, it's gone much higher, because this kind of incursion into their space, this face-off, was actually done at quite a low altitude. It was maybe done at 100 feet, 200 feet, something like that. It wasn't very high up, you know, you're just looking up like that and you can see it happening, you know, it's not, and I could see everything, you know, it's very close by. But it goes off, and then somehow I'm seeing it slightly differently. I'm seeing it actually drop its bomb, it goes into a free fall, and then when it gets really close to the ground, then it essentially is like a missile then at that point. Then I see the jet come out the back, and then it just homes in on its target, and it goes straight into this target. And it was almost like it needed to get low, and then it fired across, you know, to where it wanted to go. So not like a standard laser guided bomb where they use fins and stuff like that, don't they, to guide it along the laser. Other ones that use various different things, you know, generally fins and stuff like that to guide them. This actually used a propellant, obviously, to get it where it was going. And that's not like something I've seen, not something that, you know, such a huge bomb / missile. Anyway, so this thing blasts off, smashes into its target. I seem to remember that the road that I was on in this car was kind of like a long tarmac, you know, long road that's going off. And as far as what's around me, it's kind of desolate. You know, it's not desert, but it's like it's not really got much in the way of any kind of vegetation around. So that's the kind of environment. Yeah, the missile goes off, hits the target. And then I quickly look back in the car, and I see I've got my 2 little girls in the back. So they're not little girls now, you know, they're 15 and 11. Hopefully I got that right. 15, 12. Hopefully I got that right. So I'm absolutely terrible with dates. Apologies. And I look back, and they were a lot younger, I believe, at the time, maybe sort of 10, sub 10 sort of age. And I'm looking back and thinking, right, I know that you've gone through the sinner's prayer and stuff like that, but that's make sure 100%. And so I started going through saying, look, please, both of you, call out to Jesus, that kind of thing. And then I woke up just before this thing detonated. Now, I was very aware it was nuclear, and I was very aware it had a fuse delay. So there was that moment of it went in, smashed in, and I knew, right, it hasn't gone off. This is going to be big when this goes off. I've already parked up the car, you know, so I think there was a couple of other cars on the road. We've just parked up when we saw this thing going on and just stayed still, you know. Anyway, so my thoughts on this, right? So what I would, it's obviously a compilation of loads of different dreams. So I've already kind of mentioned some of the bits and pieces with Isaiah and Daniel about that part. First dream about war stuff. It just felt like it was kind of building stuff up war-wise. almost like it was taking me through wars of the past, wars of the present, wars of the future, maybe something like that. Wars on the computer game, yeah, I don't know what that was to do with tactics and stuff like that. Not really sure, but it felt like I needed to see that plasma weapon, which made me think of it being futuristic. And when I first saw, obviously, this gun firing, why did I do that? Is it a plane? Gun didn't fire like that. But when the gun fired, I thought, is this an energy weapon? Because I was seeing if there's a connection between that Command and Conquer computer game plasma ball thing and this energy weapon, but they were completely different. But it felt very futuristic at the same time. So what I started looking into was the actual plane itself. I don't know if you can see that. Probably won't look particularly great, but that's kind of like the plane. So it was just incredibly triangular, just a full delta wing for the whole wing. And I think it just had like a little bit obviously to see through, and then I think it had like twin jets towards the back end of it. So when I first thought about it, I thought, oh, it reminds me a little bit of the Top Gun movie, the new one, the Maverick one, which is the SR-72, which is actually called the Son of Blackbird. It wasn't that one because, again, if you see that from above, it's more curvy in shape. So it wasn't that one. 100% wasn't that one. One that I thought that was very close was actually the SR-91, which is nicknamed the Aurora. It looked a lot like that. And SR-91, yeah, is it that one? But it was very, very triangular shaped. Very, very triangular shaped. It was clearly the US in this example that was the aggressor, so they were looking for, I imagine, some sort of element of surprise. Maybe, I don't know. Or maybe they were just so bold they just went into this area and thought, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Stop us, that kind of thing. But this other plane that was investigating it, as I said, it's almost like, like our current, say, 6th gen facing off against a 4 gen. It was just like one kind of hierarchy below like an F-35 versus an F-16 or something like that. It was like there's clearly a difference in technology there, but not a million miles away. This thing was still hovering. This other country's one still looked very futuristic looking, but clearly the US one was just another level about its weaponry and everything that it had. But yeah, as I said, this other plane just came in. It was investigating what was going on. I certainly assumed that this bomb was definitely a nuclear one, but the dream ended before actual detonation, so I don't know for sure. But it was just that panic, even though this thing has fired this missile off a long distance away, because it's, as I said, it's gone up, it's flown off, it's dropped its bomb, its missile's gone off. It's a distance away. But again, I had this kind of binocular vision, almost like I'm seeing it through a camera as to what happened. But it was close enough that I thought I was going to be involved, in some way. So, as I said, this happened, when was it? 7th of January, 2025. Now, when I was writing this out in my dream journal, I'm writing this out at, say, 5th of July, 2025. Now, at this point, the US has actually did attack Iran. It was obviously a secret attack. It was using the B-2 bombers. Yeah, they're sort of triangular shaped, but again, I'm not going to say this was a prophetic dream. I'm just going to say the plane that was used looked way more like the stealth fighter, the F-117A, than it looked like anything like the B-2. It looked completely different to the B-2, other than the bomb that was dropped. It looked very chunky in comparison, as I said, to when you saw, all the media footage of that bomb dream being dropped, that was huge in comparison. So that's then happened, but interesting parallels. As I said, it was a stealth aircraft for sure. It was a incredibly futuristic looking plane that was used, a massive bomb that was used. There was an element of surprise aspect to what they were looking to achieve. Obviously they did achieve it with the attack on Iran's nuclear bits and pieces. But as I said, this was clearly future technology. I have actually since been watching a lot of stuff actually about is it the F-22 Raptor, There was something that came out really recently. I watched it literally yesterday, and they were talking about how they're looking to create 5.5 generation fighters, because 6th generation fighters are really expensive. They're going to take some time to put together, and they were going to maybe put in an intermediate kind of fleet that was going to have longer range. This is all with China and stuff kind of in mind, of the distance that missiles can travel from China to defend their shores versus aircraft carrier range of boats and stuff. So you can't get the aircraft carriers in close enough to actually send off a lot of traditional fighters, because your aircraft carrier would have to come in within range of actual defensive missiles that would just blow up your aircraft carriers before you can even launch your aircraft to do any kind of bombing raid or anything like that. So what the US is apparently looking into is something that will be able to cover longer distance. So for example, they're creating stealth fuel tanks to go on the F-35 fighter jet, so that they can go longer distance. Obviously they haven't put anything, and everything's been inside the aircraft kind of missiles that fire out, rather than anything under the wing, because otherwise it compromises stealth. So but what they were looking to do is, potentially what was thrown out there was adapting or creating something on a similar frame, I think it was, to an F-22, I believe. But they were extending it and doing all different bits to it. But what was created was 3 iterations. So there was like the current one. Let's make a little tweak here. This is only going to cost a little bit extra. If you want to do this, what we could do is we could add this on. We could add that on, stretch that out. It will have extra missile capability. It'll have extra fuel range capability. Or we can go with this one. Then that's more delta wing. So again, it's more triangular in shape. And then the ultimate sort of most expensive but the most extreme things that they could do with that same airframe was their other one, which was basically a perfect triangle. And where I kind of showed you there what I drew, see with those little bits there, which are kind of like the engines. On the picture that I saw of it, that was actually flaps, because if you've got no tail that's upright on anything to help banking and lift and all this kind of stuff, then you have to use those tail rudders to create lift and make it maneuverable and all that kind of stuff. So again, I'm not an expert on planes, but as I said, I've just been watching a lot recently, but it looked very similar to that, very, very similar to that actually, and it did kind of make me think, oh, okay. And that was literally yesterday that I watched that. But yeah, as I said, it was just interesting about the similarities of that kind of strike. But again, I'm not at all saying that it was the same thing. Clearly it wasn't. This was like a more stealth fighter-ish looking thing in comparison to any kind of B-2 bombers. It wasn't on Iran or anything like that. I had no idea as to what nation it was that was attacked, but I can't imagine that Iran's going to get to the same sort of, or very close a peer adversary to the US. I mean, obviously, if we're looking at peer adversaries, it's going to be more likely China, isn't it? Now, China is making a jet pretty much exactly like that. Very, very similar to that. But I don't think it hovers. And this one hovered. And it's just interesting. Just interesting. What I did think about it was, what is that weapon? So that weapon that just fired this bolt out, that was so quick, my eye could barely pick it up. So it clearly wasn't just a machine gun. It wasn't loads of bullets going out. It was just like bang, bang, just like that. Super, super quick. And it was obviously really, really powerful. And it made me think of actually, I'd been watching, this was months and months and months ago from when I wrote this, but I was watching stuff about rail guns. And rail guns are obviously electromagnetically propelled shells. So you can just go with a shell that's almost like a dart looking thing. It's super, super pointed because of the speed it goes at. It goes humongous speeds. But they need just massively vast amounts of power to generate the power needed to fire this propellant out. But it doesn't have any explosive on it. It's just the sheer impact of this thing hitting at whatever speed it goes at. It's a phenomenal speed. But it just rips through stuff. But I watched something on it where they were talking about obviously mounting on ships. I've since watched other stuff to say it looks like they've dropped that idea completely now, because of the fact that the barrels that they use for that, they don't last very long because of the sheer friction, and the recoil on these things is just so extreme. that you can really only mount them on ships and maybe land-based or something like that, maybe coastal defence or something like that. But it looked like that on a plane, but I googled it and they said, yeah, there's no way you can get that on a plane, because the amount of power that's needed, that's why they would put it on like a nuclear ship or something like that, you know, because of the power is available for that kind of thing. But it's all the amount of power, and the firing speed is very, very slow on them, so in comparison to traditional shells. Anyway, but they're the sort of things where they fire and you can literally point at what you want to hit, and it could be miles and miles and miles away, but because of the speed it's going at, it doesn't drop in elevation, you know, very much, because it's not affected by wind or anything. It's just going at such a ridiculous speed that it's just not affected by stuff like that. So it's like a point and fire, and you're going to hit what you're aiming for. You know, you don't have to account for anything else. But yeah, it just said, yeah, it would just rip apart the body frame of any kind of plane. So clearly not what it was, but I'm just describing what it looked like. So very, very futuristic. Yeah, that looked like a railgun, but wasn't. Can't have been. Well, unless they perfect that technology, but it looks like they're just going down different routes of using lasers and stuff like that instead now. And then obviously hypersonic missiles and things like that. Yeah, so yeah, that's it. As I said, I thought it was just an interesting one. I did actually want to, because I saw this as nuclear, so I thought, oh yeah, brilliant, I'll cover this one off. I'm searching for one that's actually very, very different, as to do with, again, an evangelistic thing, where I'm like, you know, a bomb's going off, and I'm saying to my wife in that one, look, you've got to put your faith in Jesus, etc., etc., etc. Literally, when I'm everything view is whiting out, you know, from a nuclear bomb. I've got to find that one. That was really, really interesting. But hopefully this one was interesting as well. Again, apologies, it's quite long, but just wanted to go through some of the technology and those kind of bits and pieces. But as I said, hopefully it was interesting. Thanks for your time. What I did want to say, I just want to bolt this on at the end, is because it's an evangelistic dream, because I was talking to my children saying put their faith in Jesus. I want to just read Romans 10, 9 to 10, very briefly. So if you're looking to put your faith in Jesus, this is what the Bible says, literally is all you really need to do. So, as I said, I'll quote then. So, if you declare with your mouth Jesus is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. For it is with your heart that you believe and are justified, and it is with your mouth that you profess your faith and are saved. Okay, so just a little bit on the end. I'm trying to put this kind of scripture into a lot more of my videos, because they feel quite generic dream videos otherwise. Yeah, thanks for your time.